And here we go.
Great. Well, thanks, Shannon. Thanks for taking care of all the details, because I know that at this particular point, I would have trouble doing that at the same time. But welcome to everybody who's already joined us. This is the three, we'll call it critical, common sales mistakes and how to avoid them. Yes, they're major sales mistakes, certainly. But the reason why we've chosen them in part is because of the criticality and because so many people do them. So as we think about it, I mean, today we've got a number of people who are here in various roles, ranging from CEO who has sales organization below them to VPs of sales to salespeople. And I think you're probably going to see yourself a little bit differently depending upon which of those roles you're currently in, and perhaps where you came from as well. So if you take a look at this guy, this next picture, you'll see the sales guy. Well, actually, it's not the sales guy you're seeing. That's the person at the sales guy. And I'm using that word guy for both genders, if you will. But that is, if you will, the person that you're trying to get to. And among the challenges that you have is that that person has automatically put up some walls. In this particular case, he has a lot of people who are trying to get at him. You're just one of them, and you find out that he really doesn't want to deal with you for whatever reason, or he's giving you information that, like the word no, when he really wants to say yes, or when you think he wants to say yes. But in any case, you might see yourself in this picture as one of the people trying to talk to this person here with some challenge being, hey, he's not helping you get the sale. Remember, it's not about you, it's about him. We talk about that a little bit. Anyway, in the next slide, you'll see, perhaps if you're a vice president of sales or maybe even a CEO, you'll see something a little bit differently. As you talk to your sales team, you might be getting answers that you don't expect, that you have issues with, that you're going, is he giving me or is she giving me the right answer, or is that person doing what they need to do in order to be successful? I can't tell you how many times people come up to me and say things like, look, I just hired 10 people during the last year and 3 of them came through and the other didn't. Salespeople suck. They're just terrible. They're always misleading, blah, 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 all these other things that have to do with it's all about the salespeople not coming through. My response usually is, if 7 out of 10 people are not coming through, the chances are it's not just your salespeople. There may be something else that's more insidious, that's more sinister, that's more difficult, that you have to pay attention to, that's on a broader level. We'll talk about that in a moment. So why are you listening to Shannon, Greg, and me doing this? Probably because we've got some background in this. We've got experience having worked with a number of sales launches. We've grown sales teams. We've grown revenue, created process for a number of organizations, and with some significant level of success. We've worked with some of the best people who are out there doing it, learning from them on a very consistent basis. And I think one of the reasons why it's important here today is because we're process oriented. And we have a true belief in what we will call a consistent, repeatable, scalable process. And you can see that. And by the way, if you want to see more about us and learn and what we've done, you're welcome to go to our website, which we'll talk about at the end of the webinar, and you'll be able to get to our LinkedIn profiles from there as well. At any rate, we look at this process as a machine, and that machine is basically a scalable sales machine. As you'll be able to see here in the next slide that we've got up here for you, there are 5 basic components to that. And when I just mentioned that people who are saying, hey, look, my sales team doesn't come through, they often don't recognize that it's not necessarily the salesperson, but it could be the strategy isn't holding water, the processes are in place, maybe they're not giving them the right support. And in fact, something that would be here under skills, it's not just a question of the sales skills and sales tools, but it's also a question of leadership tools and direction and skills as well. So these things together make up what we like to call a scalable sales machine and are important to what you do. So as I said before, we're going to be talking today about 3 common critical sales mistakes. And we've frankly picked them and candidly picked them out of dozens that we could have talked about. But why did we pick these 3? Well, for one, it's because the sales mistakes that we've chosen not only are critical, but they happen to many people, whether they're new in the sales realm. And by the way, when we talk about salespeople, we're talking about anybody who's in the mode of persuasion, whether it's customer support, whether it's sales, whether it's we have a company that uses nurses in order to be able to get their sales up and running, could be relationship managers. There's a whole bunch of euphemisms for salespeople, and we're talking about all of them. But it doesn't matter whether you're new or whether you've been doing this for a while. You've probably fallen into these traps at least once, probably many times, and chances are you still do it. The mistakes that we're going to talk about today are so overpowering that they will have a very significant effect on your achievements and can make even the otherwise high performers fail when they're trying to get their revenue or increase their customers or whatever their particular focus is. These particular mistakes thrive on inertia. That is, once you start to do them, you get into a habit of doing them, and they're hard to stop. And again, I'll say that some of these are mistakes of the sales type, and some of them are more of the corporate type, where they're actually endemic to the entire organization, or at least to the sales team. Now, these mistakes can be stopped, but it takes both focus on fixing them, and it also takes a good implementation plan. Now, that plan might not be the same for every salesperson. In fact, it might not be the same for every sales team, but you need a plan in order to be able to do that. And a fun part about it is once you fix them, the impact on your attainment, on your sales, on your customer acquisition can be very, very dramatic. So the first one is focusing on the wrong deals. And there are three ways that we see this type of mistake appearing in a sales process. One of them is the wrong customers. Another one is called what we call funnel too wide. And another one is what we call funnel too narrow. So looking at that one about the wrong customers, that one is a very, very basic mistake. And if you're focusing on the wrong customers, you might feel like this woman on the right side is a salesperson who is talking to a client or a prospect or a lead and somehow is having trouble getting their attention. It could be due to product mismatch with the market, or perhaps wrong pricing, or what have you. It's not unusual for me to hear about sales journeys in which a salesperson of record says to me, you know what, I'm up against this client. They have a $100,000 deal product. I've got a $1,000 deal product, or vice versa. And you have to ask yourself, is that somebody's chasing the wrong deal? Because if you're looking at someone who could be spending $100,000 and you're only pitching something for $1,000, it's not likely that your solution is going to be right for them, or vice versa. So this one, we're not going to talk about too much today. We're going to dwell on some of the others. Now, the funnel too wide issues, on the other hand, there are two of them, the funnel too different issues, I should say. There's the funnel too wide issue and the funnel too narrow. So the funnel too wide is when you have more deals in your funnel than you can handle. And you can see the way we've drawn it up here that the bottom of the funnel is actually missing. You're spending so much time with the leads that are coming in and with the early stage, and there are so many of them that you're not actually getting many of them, if any of them, to the closing stage. You're misunderstanding the buying cycle, perhaps. You continue to handle the sales cycle incorrectly as they may be going through, or perhaps you're spending the wrong time with the wrong accounts. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are the wrong accounts, but you're spending the time at the wrong time with them because of the needs. And typical causes for this is what we might call happy ears. You're not wanting to hear a no, because hearing a no means you failed, or at least so you think. No is not a bad word in sales vernacular. It's not as good as yes, but you have to recognize when no really means no, and that you don't have a deal there. And you have to be able to get them out of the funnel. It could be because you're asking the wrong questions, and because you're asking the wrong questions, you're not necessarily qualifying them properly, and therefore keeping prospects in your funnel that really shouldn't be there, where asking the right questions might help you make that happen and narrow the funnel, if you will. Or this is the one that I think is very insidious: wanting to impress your superiors. I know there are salespeople out there who simply want to show as many deals as possible in their funnel because they think they're superiors, their VP of sales, their director, their CEO will like them better and will believe they're doing the job. They're not. And it's an incorrect assumption to think they are. But it happens all the time. And unfortunately, it's something that you really need to be a you need to have a good ear for in order to be able to recognize. Now, on the other side, there's a funnel too narrow. And this one is when you don't have enough deals flowing through your funnel in order to be able to reach your objectives. So you might be able to close all of those leads that are in there that are likely to close, and you might still only reach 50% or 75% instead of 100% of your deal. And that happens in a couple different areas. Typically, it's because of not enough time spent prospecting. That's perhaps the most significant way that this type of scenario happens. It also happens if you don't expect your salespeople to do their prospecting, and if you do top of the funnel type of lead generation activities using a marketing team, and that marketing team isn't effective at doing it. They perhaps aren't looking at the analytics, but there are a number of different ways that might happen. Or it could be because you're simply lacking follow-up. Therefore, they just leave. The people who could be buyers of yours just leave the funnel. They become non-prospects just because you're not paying the right attention to them. So what we would really like to see is what you'll see in the next in the next slide. We really would love to see these sides be parallel, but I've never in multiple decades ever seen a funnel actually look like that. They almost always look like this, or I should say they always look like that, because some leads are not going to turn into clients. Some prospects are not going to turn into clients, no matter how well you do your job with them. They'll be a better competitor. They'll be a better fit. There'll be some other reason that they'll buy something else or not buy it all. So this is typically what you might want a funnel to generally look like. Now, it could have some differences between this, but this just shows you what a healthy funnel looks like. And how do you fix these types of problems in order to get there? Well, first of all, you need a focus early and often on lead generation. That's perhaps the most important thing. And a lot of sales processes and a lot of people don't have that focus on lead generation. They think it's something that you do when you run out of leads. It's not. It's something you have to do all along. It could be that you need to have strong funnel analytics and reporting, especially when you're doing it on the marketing side. And that means not only at the salesperson level, but also at the team level, so that you can adjust and make things happen as you need them to happen based upon what the effects are of what you're doing. And then finally, you need to manage the quality of the efforts in addition to the quantity of the efforts. I hear over and over again, boy, this guy's not making enough calls, or this guy's not sending enough salespeople, or this person sending enough emails out, or not touching enough people through LinkedIn. Those are all great things to say, yes, because they're easy to manage. But if you're sending out twice that many and still not doing the right things, you're still not going to get the effect that you want. So those are three of the things you need to do in order to avoid those types of problems. Greg.
Thanks, David. The second challenge that can really impact results is a lack of process. And in sales, when we talk about process, we're talking about the idea that just simply putting things against the wall is almost never going to work out very well. It's going to create a pretty significant mess in terms of trying to just handle the amount of business that you'd like to be able to bring into the organization. And in the next slide, as Ben will attest to, of late especially, not having a process is like not having a coordinated playbook. The idea that a process can apply to selling is akin to, in many respects, having a formula that can be followed that you expect to be successful. To extend the sporting metaphor a little bit further, the idea that a team that's going to take the field and expect to win is going to do that based on what they believe is the winning set of steps that need to be taken. When it comes to sales, the same is true in so much as every day is a competition. Your prospects always have choices. Sometimes that choice is the status quo, but often if they're in a significant shopping process, they're looking for a solution to a problem. They're going to be looking at you and competitors, and part of that sales process has to account for that competition. You have to know whether or not you're going to be up against someone who's a leader in terms of price. It could be someone who's a bigger organization a better known brand. All those things have to be accounted for. And without a sales process in place, that can be a difficult thing, and certainly not a very effective thing if you're trying to invent that for each and every opportunity. So when we think about what is a sales process, then what we talk about is the idea that, in the next slide, is that like any other process in business, it's a defined, repeatable set of steps. You wouldn't expect to go into your accounting department and find people doing things differently there. You wouldn't expect to see that in the manufacturing part of the business or in logistics. Every part of the business has some sort of process associated with it. And in my experience, personally, I've seen a bit of reluctance, especially on the part of salespeople, to accept this notion that you can follow a process when it comes to how you prospect, how you qualify, and how you decide essentially how to spend your own time. A salesperson doesn't have any more valuable resource to use than their own time. And without a sales process that begins with identifying what are the characteristics of a good prospect, well, what I like to tell people is that everyone's a suspect, not everyone's a prospect. And so with the sales process that begins with defining who those suspects are that have the right characteristics, the salesperson begins the sales process with the advantage of knowing that the likelihood of this organization or individual becoming a customer is much greater than if they were simply trying to pursue that opportunity without that process backing them up. And so in addition to creating an environment in which success is much more likely, the idea of having a common language around how you talk about an opportunity can really help to streamline things like sales meetings and pipeline reviews. As a salesperson, one of my, I guess early in my career, one of my least favorite things to do was to try and talk about and evaluate how I was doing in creating opportunities. And part of the reason, as I look back, was because we really didn't have good definitions around what it was that identified who a prospect was and where they were in the sales process. Any sales organization can have a definition around what does it take for an opportunity to move from one stage to the next. And in doing so, then allows for the conversation with sales managers, with directors, with owners to really be contained around this idea that if a deal is at 50%, it's at 50% because it has achieved certain milestones in the sales process. It's not a guess. It's not a feeling. Now, certainly some of that will play a role, but that shouldn't be the basis of the sales process. There needs to be a defined set of steps, and I'll take a look at an example here in a second about how that opportunity is moving through the sales funnel to getting closer and closer to being closed, which then brings me to the third point, and that is the ability to increase the accuracy of a sales forecast. If a salesperson is only really projecting qualitatively where they are in the sales process, it's really difficult to know for sure, is this opportunity moving at the velocity that you would like it to through the sales process, and how close are they to making a decision? David touched on this earlier, and it's worth reinforcing. A decision can be a no. Of course, it's not the one you want, but getting to that decision is also important, even if it's going to be a no, because as a salesperson, once again, you only have time as your most valuable resource to use in moving opportunities along. And let's face it, most people don't like to give other people bad news. And so a prospect can string you along by not telling you no, but a sales process, a well-defined sales process, can tell you essentially, if that's where you are with that particular opportunity. The whole idea then of this sales process being captured into some sort of a Salesforce automation tool allows then for the rep, the manager, the organization to have, again, a common language, a set of definitions, and a system in place that takes at least a good bit of the guesswork out of understanding just where I am in this particular deal. And a sales process, if we move to the next slide, can take on many different shapes. It really does depend on the kind of business that you're in. I really truly believe, just having been in lots of different kinds of industries and lots of different size organizations, that there's no one sales process that works for every organization. This example that you see on the screen now is a value-driven sales process. It's more strategic. It's not so much a transactional kind of a sale, but this is one in which there would be a fair number of individuals that could be involved in making the decision. And in the course of a sales process like this one, there's going to be different stages that opportunity is going to move through. And it's going to be important for the salesperson, again, to really account for the fact that they have to put their time, they have to use their time wisely and put it into the opportunities that make the most sense. And so when it comes to putting the definitions around a sales process, it's not just about the steps that get taken, but in the next slide, as we'll see, each step in that process can have a set of qualifiers, things that are used to identify exactly and precisely to the best of your ability where you are with a particular deal. And so in this one example, in which the sales process, once it's been qualified, tends to work with a sponsor as someone who can get you to that individual who has power and influence, who can actually make the purchase. The salesperson who could, with some clarity, be able to define the problem that sponsor has talked about having, know how that sponsor would measure the value that solution would provide, things like identifying what their own agendas are, because especially in larger organizations, there's going to be those kinds of interdepartmental and office politics that can influence any sort of decision. Those are things, again, as you can see on the screen, that would be the kind of indicators that would allow for that sales rep to clearly communicate to their sales manager that they understand these and any other factors that would be required to say, look, I'm at phase 2 and now moving to phase 3, and here are all the things that we have agreed are data points, bits of information that are necessary in order for us to agree that this is an opportunity now moving through the sales process, and we've identified, shared with, documented, and gotten agreement with the prospect that this is where we are in their buying decision. Shannon, I'm going to, I think, turn this over to you at this point.
Perfect. So we have talked about having the right focus on the right opportunities. We've talked about having the right process to make those opportunities work through in the proper way. And now our third mistake is focusing on the product versus solving the problems that your prospects have. And we put one up here that is just fun because we all get it. If you were selling Bounty and you had to go through your typical sales process, your needs analysis, your discovery, at some point you're going to start talking about the product that you have and how it applies back to the customer's pains. So not a customer is there that says, wow, this is amazing that this paper towel is white. That is going to solve my problems. No, they don't want to hear you speak out all of the product features that have been worked in by your R&D team, by your experience in your company. They want to hear, how will this solve my problem? If you've seen the Simon Sinek video, Start With Why, this is exactly what we're talking about here. This isn't new, but it's something we have to remind ourselves very often because we're proud. We're proud of the features that we have. We're proud that our company has been able to bring itself to this place where it's solving people's problems. And a lot of times those bells and whistles are pretty cool. If we've put out a new release, we're really excited about the things that are coming in new. But at the end of the day, if somebody's got a giant spill, they want the most absorbent product. They want something that will clean up very rapidly, and that's where we need to sit. Very oftentimes, people mistakenly end up in sales, right? So I don't know how many of you can sit at home and raise your hand and say, you know, I intentionally went into sales. We might have found ourselves in there because we were an engineer. We started doing sales engineers calls and thought, man, this is addictive. This is powerful. I love it. You might have gotten there from marketing or product management, or maybe you did come through sales. There are a number of schools in the United States now who actually have degrees in professional sales. At any rate, we can become so intoxicated with the product features that we have that we find ourselves filling holes, talking about them to our customers, where we really should be focused on making ourselves trusted advisors, solving the problems that they have. And that doesn't mean a feature dump. So how can you overcome that? You can make sure your salespeople understand the client point of view, or if you're a salesperson yourself, really think like the client. This is something that thankfully has been focused on in recent times. It's really topical to consider the buyer journey and not the seller journey. A lot of times when we've been trained in Salesforce automation or CRM systems, we're thinking about how do we move you from stage 1 to stage 2? How do we go from 10% probability to 25% probability? But we have to be thinking prescriptively about our buyers. What is their pain? How can we solve it? And what is the point of view that will help them understand what we have is better than our competitor, possibly their incumbent, or the status quo? Then we have to relate our product's benefits to the solution. So we can bring in those benefits, talk about those features, and relate it back to the solution that we have that's going to solve their problems. We want to create a repeatable sales approach which dwells on the customer. This is hard to do. This is something that you start to learn when you're little, which is we've got 2 ears and we've got 1 mouth. So we should be doing twice as much listening as talking. And that's hard in sales. We're often really gregarious people. We love building relationships. We love to talk about our companies and our products because we can see the great benefit it's done for our current customers and clients. But we have to constantly remind ourselves to step back into the customer's shoes. And then make sure exploration is a key part of your sales approach. In the 80s, we talked a lot about trial closes. And instead, I would implore you to think about trial affirmations. So saying, I think I heard you say this. Is this a problem that you're focused on currently? And you can do that throughout your sales process, not just in your one stage that's called discovery. So David, I'm going to send it back to you. We promised we'd keep it to half an hour, and we are really close.
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks, Greg. So it's interesting, that, especially because if you think about some of these things, that I think what you're going to determine is that the types of solutions that you're talking for these types of issues are all either learnable skills, they're not something that you have to be born with, or there are things that if you turn your focus to them, that you can fix some of these issues that may not require the skills. But even when we talk about things like putting tools together, it's not just, do I have a CRM system, but it's, do I have my systems set up properly for my particular type of sales process and the journey that I want to bring the buyer on in order to be able to actually do business with me at the end of that? Do I have the army of advocates set up so that as you bring them through that journey, they're able to tell people about you and therefore help you fill the funnel and therefore bring them through the process and therefore be able to tell. They all work together. So what I would suggest to you at this particular point is it all goes back into this machine that we talk about. If you are so interested, I mean, we talk about things like having the strategy and the process in place. We talk about providing the skills both at the sales level and at the leadership level. We talk about having the tools configured right and having the right tools in place. We can certainly help you with that. And Shannon, I'll ask you to move to the next slide if you would. So as she said, we are going to keep this on time and we're going to be going off in a moment. But before we do, let me just mention to you that if you would like to be able to explore any of these areas or your own sales challenges or your own sales opportunities that you would like to do, we'd be happy to work with you on that, talk to you about it. We'd be happy to put together a complimentary 30-minute sales gap analysis, either face-to-face or by web like we're doing today, in order to be able to get to the what do you need and how might we be able to help you. And the best way to make that happen is to go to www.mmasters.com, it's double M, and click on the Contact Us page, and then let us know, and one of us will get back to you and schedule that with you. If in fact you just want to keep on, if you don't have that potentially now, you may need that later, and you just want to be on our mailing list, then feel free to just go over there and be on our mailing list as well. So I'll just ask the question real quickly. Shannon and Greg, is there anything that we need to do before we close up? And we are, as I said, happy to answer questions offline after you call us.
I just want to thank everybody for attending and tell you, keep selling, keep working on it. It's hard, but it's a noble profession.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Hope this was useful to you, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you, everybody.